You picked up your phone this morning, and before your feet even touched the floor, you scrolled. And there it was again. A headline about a harvest that failed and a nation that cannot feed itself. Beneath it, a report of another border erupting, another army moving. Beneath that, a chart of markets bleeding red, and a number telling you how much less your money is worth than it was a week ago. And then, near the bottom, that strange photograph someone posted of the sky. The sun dimmed to a copper coin. The moon stained the color of old blood. You paused for half a second. You felt something you could not name, and then you kept scrolling. But what if that half second of unease was the most honest reaction you had all day? Because there is a document written nearly 2,000 years ago on an island by a man in exile that describes the exact sequence you just watched slide past your thumb. Conquest, then war, then famine and the collapse of the cost of living, then death on a scale that reduces human beings to statistics, and then the sky itself turning dark. Not scattered predictions, not vague poetry, a sequence in order, the same order that is loading right now in your feed. That document is the 6th chapter of the book of Revelation, and the disturbing thing is not that it mentions disaster. Every ancient text mentions disaster. The disturbing thing is the structure, the way one seal opens and produces exactly the crisis you are living through, and then the next seal opens and produces the next one, following the previous like dominoes that were set in place before your grandparents were born. Ancient scholars noticed this pattern and trembled at it. Most modern readers scroll past it. You've been holding both texts in your hand this whole time, the news feed and the prophecy, and you never laid them side by side. Today we are going to lay them side by side, verse by verse, seal by seal. 5 prophecies that you are not waiting for. 5 prophecies you are watching unfold live. And I am not going to name a single country. I'm not going to name a single leader. I do not have to, because the whole point of what John saw is that this was never about one empire or one war. It was about a pattern that would repeat and intensify until the pattern itself became unmistakable. And the question we must ask ourselves is simple and terrifying. What if we have finally reached the moment when the pattern is impossible to unsee? Here is what most people miss when they read Revelation 6. They fixate on the horses, the white one, the red one, the black one, the pale one. They argue about the horses for centuries, but the horses are not the revelation. The horses are the distraction. Hidden beneath the surface of this chapter is a detail that changes the meaning of every headline you fear. A detail about who is holding the scroll, whose hand is breaking each seal, and why the chaos you are watching is not chaos at all. When you see it, you will never read the news the same way again. And I promise you, by the end of this, that single detail will either be the most comforting truth you have ever heard or the most sobering, depending entirely on where you are standing when the seals finish opening. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, because before the sky turns black, before the markets fall, before the armies move, there is a first seal. And when the Lamb breaks it, the first rider comes out. And he does not arrive the way you think he does. He does not come with an army. He does not come with fire. He comes wearing something on his head that was given to him, riding out to conquer a world that will never even realize it has been conquered. Most translations rush past him. The original language does not. And what the original language reveals about that first rider is where our descent into Revelation 6 begins. If a part of you already knows this content matters, that these are the conversations you were meant to be having right now, then do this before we go further. Subscribe to God Revealed and tap the like button. It is a small thing, but it is how this message reaches the next person who is scrolling past the same headlines you just saw, feeling that same half second of unease, and wondering if anyone is going to explain what it means. Now let us break the first seal. The text says it plainly. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. That is the entire scene. 4 sentences: a white horse, a bow, a crown, and a rider going out to conquer. And for nearly 2,000 years, this rider has been one of the most fiercely debated figures in all of Scripture. Some scholars argue that this first rider is Christ himself. They point to the white horse in Revelation 19, where Jesus returns riding a white horse to make war in righteousness, and they conclude that the 2 riders must be the same. The color white, they say, is the color of holiness, victory, and purity throughout the book. Others propose the opposite, that this rider is a counterfeit, a deceiver, the spirit of conquest that imitates Christ in order to mislead the world. But when we examine the evidence embedded in the original language, the picture sharpens in a way that neither camp fully expects. Consider the crown. There are 2 different Greek words for crown in the book of Revelation. There is the diadema, the royal diadem, the crown of a rightful king, and that is the crown Christ wears when he returns in chapter 19, where the text says, "On his head are many crowns." But the crown given to this first rider is a different word entirely. It is Stephanos, the victor's wreath, the garland handed to the winner of a contest. And notice what the text says. It does not say he seized the crown. It says the crown was given to him. He did not earn it in battle. He did not take it by force. It was placed on his head by someone else, and only then did he ride out. The original language reveals something startling here. This is a conqueror whose authority is granted, whose victory is permitted, whose power to go out is handed to him under a hand higher than his own. And then there is the bow. Pause and consider this detail, because it is easy to miss. The rider carries a bow, but the text never mentions an arrow. He holds the weapon of conquest, the symbol of long-range dominance, the instrument that strikes from a distance before the enemy ever closes in. Yet no arrow is ever loosed. This is conquest that does not require the shot. This is a victory won before the fighting begins. And that, more than anything else in these 2 verses, is what makes this first rider so unsettling when we hold him up against the world in front of us. And so, when we examine the evidence, the debate resolves into something more layered than either side allows. The early church fathers themselves were divided. Some, like Irenaeus, read the white rider as the victorious spread of the gospel going out into all the world, the word conquering hearts before any earthly kingdom could resist it. Others read it as the great imitation, the counterfeit conqueror who mirrors Christ's white horse precisely in order to deceive, wearing the costume of victory while carrying an empty bow. But notice what both readings share, and this is the detail that unlocks the seal. Whether the rider spreads truth or spreads deception, he conquers the same way, not by force, but by capturing what people believe. The battlefield of the first seal is not the land, it is the mind. It is the realm of conviction, of allegiance, of the stories a civilization tells itself about what is true. And that is a battlefield on which no arrow ever needs to fly. Because here is the pattern that becomes unmistakable when we lay this verse beside the feed in your hand. The most complete conquests happening in our age are not being won with arrows, they are being won without them. Territory of the mind, territory of belief, territory of attention. A narrative goes out, and it conquers, not by force but by persuasion so total that the conquered never feel the conquest happening. Nations are moved not by invasion but by influence. Populations are shifted not by armies but by algorithms. The bow is drawn across the entire earth, and the arrow is never fired because it does not need to be. The conquest is already complete by the time anyone notices the rider has ridden out. This isn't merely historical, it's prophetic. John was shown a mode of conquest that his first-century readers could barely imagine, and we are the generation watching it saturate every screen we own. Sit with that for a moment, because it exposes something about our age that we rarely say out loud. The empires of the ancient world had to march. They had to cross rivers and lay siege and spend the lives of soldiers to take what they wanted. Conquest was slow and it was visible, and everyone knew when it was happening. But the rider on the white horse conquers a world where the most valuable territory is no longer soil. It is attention. It is belief. And that kind of territory can be taken in silence, in comfort, without a single person feeling invaded. A population can be conquered while it scrolls, while it laughs, while it feels perfectly free. The genius and the horror of the first seal is that its victims applaud the very conquest that claims them. The crown is given, the bow is drawn, and the world is taken, and the world calls it progress. The pieces begin to align when we understand that the first rider was never meant to look like an enemy. He was meant to look like a winner. And now notice what the text does not say. It does not say this rider brings peace. It gives him a crown and a bow and a mission, and then it moves on. Because the first seal was never meant to be the destination. It was meant to be the doorway. The white horse rides out first, because conquest always comes first. Conquest sets the board. Conquest gathers the pieces. And once a world has been quietly conquered, its mind captured, its attention claimed, its allegiances quietly redrawn, it becomes ready for what the second seal releases. Because a world that has been conquered can then be divided, and a divided world can then be set against itself. The pieces begin to align when we understand the sequence. First, the silent rider, then the loud one. And the second rider does not carry a bow, he never fires. The second rider carries a sword, and he is given permission to use it. When that seal breaks, the piece that the first rider quietly stole is not merely threatened. It is taken from the earth entirely. And the color of the second horse tells you exactly what that looks like. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. Read that slowly. The rider is given power. Again, that phrase, given. The same divine permission that placed the wreath on the first rider now hands a sword to the second. And notice precisely what his mission is. He does not come to make war between nations only. The text says he was given power to make people kill each other. The Greek phrase carries the sense of one another. Neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother. The fracturing of peace, not at the level of empires alone, but down in the streets, down in the households, down where ordinary people live. The color itself is a message. The word for the horse is pyros, the color of fire, the color of blood. And the sword he carries is not the small blade a traveler wore at his side. The Greek word is machaira, but the text calls it a great one, the large sword of slaughter, the weapon associated with butchery rather than defense. Early readers of this passage, living under the shadow of an empire built on the sword, understood exactly what this rider meant. Peace is not the natural state of a fallen world. Peace is a fragile gift that can be lifted. And when it is lifted, what floods into the vacuum is not merely conflict between armies, but a spirit of violence that turns the human heart against its own kind. Now hold that against the feed. You do not need me to name a war, because the moment I named one, 3 more would have erupted by the time you finished watching this. That is the point. The second seal is not one war. It is the removal of peace as a condition of the earth. It is the sense, growing in every honest heart, that the ground beneath global stability has gone soft. that the old restraints are failing, that the fire-colored rider has been given his sword, and that the whole earth has become a place where peace is the exception and conflict is the expectation. This isn't the description of a single event. It is the description of an age, and we are living in it. But the rider of war never travels alone, because war does something to a civilization before it ever reaches the battlefield. War disrupts the harvest. War closes the trade routes. War empties the storehouses. And so, the moment the second seal finishes its work, the third seal opens onto its inevitable consequence. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come!" I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. Here is where the prophecy stops being poetic and becomes disturbingly precise. Scales in the ancient world meant one thing: the rationing of food by weight. When bread is weighed on a balance rather than measured in a basket, it means scarcity has arrived. And then the voice gives the price. And the price is the horror hidden in plain sight. A day's wages in John's world was a single denarius, and the voice announces that a single denarius will now buy about 2 pounds of wheat, barely enough grain to feed one person for one day. An entire day of labor for a single day of survival, nothing left over, nothing to save, nothing for your family beyond your own mouth. Or if you stretched it, 6 pounds of the cheaper barley, the grain that was considered fit for animals, enough to feed a small family, but only by eating what you would rather not. This is not the language of ordinary poverty. This is the language of an economy where the cost of simply staying alive consumes everything a person can earn. The pattern is unmistakable when we examine it. The black horse is the collapse of the cost of living into the wage of a single day. And then comes the strangest line of all: do not damage the oil and the wine. Consider the implications of that single command. While the poor weigh out their survival grain by grain, the oil and the wine, the luxuries, the goods of the comfortable, the products of the wealthy estates, are explicitly protected. What most readers miss is that this line reveals the character of the crisis. This is not a famine that touches everyone equally. This is a collapse that crushes the ones at the bottom, while the assets of the ones at the top remain untouched. The scales tip against the many, while the vintage of the few is preserved. Let that truth sink in, because you have watched this exact headline scroll past you. The widening gap, the cost of bread against the cost of the vineyard, the survival of the poor measured out to the last gram while other markets are shielded and told, do not be damaged. 3 riders now. The one who conquered without an arrow, the one who took peace with a great sword, the one who weighed out survival on a scale. And each of them, remember, was permitted. Each was given his authority. This is a sequence unfolding under control, not chaos breaking loose. But the 4th seal is different from the 3 before it. The first 3 riders were described by what they carried: a bow, a sword, a scale. The 4th rider is described by his name. And for the first and only time in this vision, the rider who comes out is not merely a symbol. He is given a name that every human being already knows and already fears. And something follows close behind him that the text refuses to let you overlook. When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. Stop at the color, because the color is the first thing the original language forces us to see, and almost every reader misses it. The word translated pale is chloros. It is the root of our word chlorophyll. Everywhere else in the ancient texts, chloros means green. The green of grass, the green of new leaves, the green of living things. But applied to a horse and its rider, it is not the green of life. It is the green-grey of a corpse. It is the pallor of flesh from which the blood has drained. John reached for the word that meant living green and turned it into the color of death. And in that single deliberate distortion, he tells you everything about what this rider is. Life's own color, corrupted into the shade of the grave. And then, for the first and only time in the entire sequence, the rider is named. The first 3 horsemen were mysteries you had to interpret. This one wears his identity openly. His name is Death. And notice what the text places immediately behind him. Hades, the grave, the realm of the dead, following close behind to gather what the rider strikes down. This is a procession. Death rides ahead to reap, and the grave rolls behind to collect. There is no ambiguity here, no scholarly debate about whether this rider might secretly be someone benevolent. Death is death, and he is given power, that phrase for the 4th time, over a 4th of the earth. Consider the weight of that fraction, a 4th of the earth, not all of it, not half of it, a quarter. And here is where the mercy hidden inside the terror begins to surface, because the number is a limit. The pale rider is not given the whole world. His authority is measured, bounded, restrained to a portion. Ancient scholars noticed this pattern across the judgments of Scripture, that the wrath of God is almost always partial, always leaving a remnant, always stopping short of total annihilation. In the plagues of Egypt, in the judgments of the prophets, in the flood that still spared 8 souls, the pattern holds. Judgment falls, but judgment is contained. The 4th seal is horrifying precisely because it is real, but it is not the end, and the fraction proves it. What unfolds in the natural here reflects a restraint operating in the heavenly realms, a hand that permits the rider to go out, but draws a line he cannot cross. And look at the 4 weapons this rider is given, because they are not random: sword, famine, plague, and the wild beasts of the earth. This is almost a direct echo of an ancient prophecy, the 4 dreadful judgments that the prophet Ezekiel recorded, the sword and the famine and the wild beasts and the plague, sent against a land that had turned away. When we cross-reference the pale rider with Ezekiel 14, the connection is unmistakable. John is not inventing a new horror. He is gathering the ancient judgments of God, the 4 that ran throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, and binding them together into a single rider on a single corpse-colored horse. The literary structure itself reveals the meaning. The 4th seal is the convergence, the moment when the separate calamities of the first 3 riders fuse into one. War produces famine, famine produces plague, plague produces death. And the pale rider is what it looks like when all of them arrive at once. There is one more layer buried in this 4th seal, and the church fathers who read it in Greek caught it immediately. The 4 riders together form a deliberate progression, a descent that tightens like a noose. The first rider conquers, and conquest destabilizes. The second removes peace, and the removal of peace breeds war. The third brings the scarcity that always trails war, and scarcity starves the body. And the 4th simply collects what the first 3 have prepared, because a world that has been conquered, divided, and starved is a world ripe for death. The pale rider is not an interruption of the sequence. He is its harvest. What most readers miss is that death does not need to create anything new. He only needs to gather what the earlier seals have already ripened. The literary structure itself reveals the terrible logic. Each seal creates the conditions for the next, and the pale horse is where the whole chain finally arrives. Now bring it to your feed, and bring it carefully, because this is the seal that requires the most honesty from us. You have watched death reported as a number, a running total on the corner of a screen. A figure that climbs and climbs until it stops meaning anything, until the human mind, mercifully and terribly, goes numb. A quarter of a region struck by disease. Whole populations pressed by war and hunger and sickness at the same moment. And the numbers scroll, and you feel that half second again, and then you keep going. But here is what the text will not let us do. The text will not let us leave them as numbers. The pale rider does not kill a statistic. He kills people, each one a soul, each one known, each one gathered by the grave that follows behind. This isn't merely a headline about a fourth of the earth. It is a summons to see the fourth of the earth as heaven sees it, not as data, as the beloved. And that is exactly the nerve the fifth seal touches. Because after 4 riders and all their reaping, the vision does something no newsfeed has ever done and never will. It stops counting bodies, and it starts listening to voices. The scene shifts from the earth to a place beneath an altar, where the ones already taken are not silent, and not gone, and not forgotten. They are waiting, and they are asking a question. A single question, 4 words in its heart, that the entire scrolling, screaming, numbing feed in your hand is structurally incapable of asking. When you hear what they cry out from beneath that altar, you will realize it is the question your own soul has been trying to ask every time you paused for that half second and could not name what you felt. When the Lamb opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" There it is, the question. How long? 2 words in English, and beneath them the oldest cry in all of Scripture. Because these souls beneath the altar are not asking for escape, they are not asking for comfort, they are asking for the one thing the endless feed can never give: resolution, an accounting, a moment when the pattern of conquest and war and famine and death is finally answered by a higher justice. How long, holy and true, until you make this right? And what a place they ask it from. Under the altar. In the ancient temple, when a sacrifice was offered, the blood of the offering was poured out at the base of the altar. It ran down and pooled beneath it. And the Hebrew scriptures declared that the life of a creature is in its blood. So when John sees the souls of the martyrs under the altar, he is seeing their lives, their blood, poured out as an offering, gathered at the foot of the place of sacrifice. These are the ones the pale rider took, not as statistics, but as offerings. And the question they cry is the question that echoes through the whole of Scripture. Some scholars have traced this exact cry from the blood of Abel, crying out from the ground, through the Psalms of the oppressed, through the prophets who demanded to know how long the wicked would prosper. The pattern is unmistakable. How long is the prayer of every faithful soul who has ever watched evil run unchecked? And now, beneath the altar, at the center of the vision, it is prayed one more time. But watch how heaven answers, because the answer is not what a grieving heart expects. Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until the full number of their fellow servants, their brothers and sisters, were killed just as they had been. 2 things are given. First, a white robe, the garment of vindication, of righteousness, of victory already secured. Before the judgment even falls, before the question is even answered, they are clothed in the verdict. Heaven says, in effect, you have already won. Here is the robe that proves it. And second, they are given a word about time. Wait a little longer. The delay is not divine indifference. The delay is divine patience, a specific numbered patience, waiting until a full number is complete. Let that truth sink in. The reason the seals have not reached their end is not that God has lost control of the sequence. It is that he is waiting for a number to be filled, and mercy is the only reason the clock has not yet struck. And then the 6th seal breaks, and the patience gives way to the shaking. I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair, the whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to earth as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. This is the moment the whole creation reacts. The sun goes black like sackcloth, the rough, dark cloth of mourning. The moon turns the color of blood, the stars fall, the sky itself rolls up like a scroll being closed. These images are not new inventions. They are drawn straight from the prophet Joel, who spoke of the sun turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and from the words of Jesus himself in the Gospels, who said the sun would be darkened and the stars would fall. When we cross-reference the sixth seal with Joel and the Olivet Discourse, the alignment is total. John is watching the very signs the prophets promised, and now bring it one last time to the feed. That photograph of the copper sun you scrolled past, the blood-colored moon someone posted from their backyard, the reports of the ground shaking where it has never shaken, the skies behaving in ways that make even the skeptics uneasy. Consider the implications. The sixth seal describes a creation that can no longer hold its composure, a cosmos convulsing because the moral weight of everything the first five seals unleashed has finally become unbearable. And notice how the chapter ends, because it ends with the reaction of the whole human race, and it is a reaction of pure terror. Kings, generals, the rich, the mighty, the slave and the free, all of them hiding in caves, calling out to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it?" Who can withstand it? That is the final question of Revelation 6, not how long. That was the martyr's cry. This is the cry of the terrified earth. Who can stand? Who is left standing when the sky rolls up and the mountains flee? The chapter asks it and then goes silent and leaves the question hanging in the dark. And in that silence, the real revelation of this entire vision is finally close enough to touch. Because there is one detail we have walked past 5 times now, one phrase repeated at the opening of every single seal, that answers a question far deeper than who can stand. It answers the question of who has been opening these seals all along, whose hand broke every one of them, whose fingers loosed each rider, who has been in control of this entire terrifying sequence from the very first verse. And when you finally see that hand, everything you have feared while scrolling will be turned completely upside down. Go back with me, past the 6th seal, past the 5th, past all 4 riders, to the phrase we have walked past every single time. Read the opening of each seal again and listen for the words that never change. When the Lamb opened the first seal, when the Lamb opened the second seal, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the 6th, 6 times the seal is broken, and 6 times the text tells you the same thing about the hand that breaks it. It is the Lamb, not war, not chaos, not some blind force of history spinning out of control. Every seal in the sequence you have been dreading was opened deliberately by the Lamb. And to understand why that is the most staggering revelation in the entire chapter, we have to step back 1 page into Revelation chapter 5, to the scene that comes immediately before the horses ride. In chapter 5, John sees a scroll in the right hand of the one seated on the throne, sealed with 7 seals. And a mighty angel cries out with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" And the text says that no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able even to look inside it. And John weeps. He weeps openly, because if no one can open the scroll, then history has no author, the future has no resolution, and the cries of the martyrs will never be answered. And then one of the elders says to him, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." John turns to see a lion, and what he sees instead is a lamb, looking as if it had been slain. The most important sentence in the whole vision, the one worthy to open every seal, is not a conquering beast. He is a slaughtered lamb, still bearing the marks of his death, standing alive at the center of the throne. Now hold everything together, because here is the revelation that changes every headline you have ever feared. The conquest of the first seal, the war of the second, the famine of the third, the death of the fourth, the martyr's cry of the fifth, the shaking heavens of the sixth. Not one of them broke loose on its own. Every seal was opened by the pierced hand of the one who was slain and rose. The chaos you watch scrolling past your thumb is not chaos. It is a scroll being opened in order by the only one in the universe found worthy to open it. And he opens it not as a distant tyrant, but as the Lamb who already bled for the very world these seals fall upon. This isn't merely a comforting thought. It is the structural key to the entire book. The horses do not rule Revelation 6. The Lamb rules Revelation 6. And a world whose future is held in a nail-scarred hand is a world that is not and never was out of control. Consider what this means for the very structure of history. In chapter 5, remember, John wept because no one was found worthy to open the scroll. And his tears were not sentimental. They were theological, because a sealed scroll that no one can open is a future no one can guarantee. A story with no author and no ending, a universe where the blood of the innocent cries out forever and is never answered. That is the world the news feed silently assumes. Scroll long enough and you absorb its unspoken creed. That events simply happen, that suffering is random, that no hand is steering any of it, that the strong write history and the weak are erased and forgotten. But John was shown the opposite. He was shown that the scroll is not unopened. It is being opened seal by seal by one who was found worthy, and worthiness in the logic of heaven was proven not by power, but by sacrifice. The Lamb is worthy to hold history precisely because he entered history and let it kill him and rose. The nail-scarred hand did not avoid the horsemen. It went under them, took their worst, and came out the other side alive. That is the hand now turning the seals. Let that truth sink all the way in, because it reorganizes everything. When you feel that half-second of dread scrolling through the failed harvests and the moving armies and the bleeding markets and the darkened sky, your fear is telling you a lie. The lie is that no one is holding the scroll. The lie is that the pattern is random, that the future is authorless, that the horsemen answer to no one. But the text has told you 6 times who holds the scroll. The one who holds it is the one who was slain. And that means the same hand that breaks the seals is the hand that was pierced for you. The judgment and the mercy come from the same throne, and they always have. So the question the 6th seal screams, who can withstand it, who can stand when the wrath of the Lamb has come, is not meant to leave you hiding in a cave, crying for the mountains to fall on you. It is meant to drive you to the only place where a human being can stand on that day. Because the very next thing John sees in chapter 7, before the 7th seal is ever opened, is a great multitude that no one could count. From every nation and tribe and people and language, standing before the throne, clothed in white robes. The same white robes given to the martyrs under the altar, and John is told who they are. They are the ones who have come through the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. There is the answer to who can stand, not the strong, not the powerful, not the ones who conquered without an arrow, the ones washed in the blood of the Lamb, the ones who belong to the one holding the scroll. Pause and consider the 2 multitudes the vision has now placed before you, because you belong to one of them. and the choice of which one is being made right now, in this moment, by what you do with the truth you have just heard. There is the multitude in the caves, the kings and the generals, and the rich and the mighty, and the ordinary and the enslaved, everyone who spent the opening of the seals, trusting in something that cannot hold, crying out at the end for the rocks to bury them, rather than face the one on the throne. And there is the multitude before the throne, the innumerable crowd in white, from every nation and tongue, who came through the same tribulation, saw the same seals open, felt the same earth shake, and yet stand unafraid because their robes were washed in the blood of the Lamb. Notice that both multitudes lived through identical events. The difference between them was never their circumstances. The difference was whose they were. The seals fell on both. Only one had made peace with the hand that opened them, and this is why the feed can never give you what the scroll gives you. The feed changes every hour. The headlines you feared this morning will be replaced by new ones tomorrow, and those by others the day after, an endless scroll that never resolves, never answers, never tells you who is standing behind it all. But the scroll in the pierced hand does not change. It was written before the foundation of the world, and it moves toward a single, certain end. Not the triumph of the horseman, but the wiping away of every tear, the end of death, the vindication of every soul that ever cried out, "How long?" The news feed asks you to be afraid and offers you nothing to stand on. The Word of God shows you the very same events and offers you the Lamb. Stay anchored to the one that does not change. When the sky itself rolls up like a scroll, the word of the Lord will still be standing. If this journey through Revelation 6 has stirred something in you, if you have felt the difference between scrolling in fear and standing in truth, then take a moment right now and do 3 things. Leave a comment below and tell me which of the 5 seals you see most clearly in the world around you, because your testimony becomes someone else's courage. Tap the like button so this reaches the next soul, feeling that half second of dread with no one to explain it. And follow God revealed, so that when the next layer of this mystery is unveiled, you are standing here with us to receive it. But there is one thing that matters more than any comment, any like, any subscription, and it is the reason this channel exists at all. If everything in you is tired of watching the seals open with nothing to stand on, then know this: the same Lamb who holds the scroll is holding out his pierced hand to you, right now, today, exactly where you are sitting. You do not have to understand every seal. You do not have to be strong enough to stand on your own. You only have to come to the one who was slain and rose, and let him wash your robe white in his own blood. If you are ready, pray these words with me and mean them from the depths of your heart. Say, "I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior." If you just prayed that and you meant it, then heaven itself has recorded your name, and you have just moved from the ones hiding in the caves to the ones standing before the throne in white. The seals may keep opening, the feed may keep scrolling, but you now belong to the hand that holds it all, and nothing that comes out of that scroll can ever separate you from the one who opened it for love of you.